Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Chicago Police Conduct Manual states that the use of a firearm should be the last resort measure in a situation where deadly force is necessary. Well, the case tonight here before you is about a police officer whose last resort measure became his very first choice. This case is about a police officer who, without justification, pulled out his gun and shot the plaintiff, Robert Ramirez, in the back. The facts of the case are these. On December 6, 1997, the plaintiff went to his friend's house, where he enjoyed a basketball game, a couple beers, and a game of cards. Feeling good and happy to be alive on a Friday night, the three friends went out to a bar where they had a couple more drinks, and then to another bar where they had even a couple more drinks. After they left the bar, they went to a park, where together they tested themselves in feats of athleticism, racing each other, and proving who was most physically fit. The plaintiff was a very athletic man and easily beat his opponents. However, on his way home, something happened that would change the plaintiff's life forever. Something that would rob him of his ability to work, something that would rob him of his ability to engage in athletic activities, and something that would cause him, and still cause him, continual pain. As he was driving home, the plaintiff, Robert Ramirez, pulled in behind a car who was driving incredibly slowly, 5 to 10 miles an hour, in a normal speed limit zone. He tried to signal. He tried to show that he wanted to pass. He would put on his blinker. He even swerved over to the side, to no avail. Finally, Mr. Ramirez honked his horn at the car, and the car still did not respond at all. Feeling upset, he honked his horn again. After going like this for a couple blocks, the car finally pulled off to the side of the road, and Mr. Ramirez, quite irritated at this point, rolled down his window, pulling alongside the car, and called the driver an idiot. The driver got out of his car and began yelling at Mr. Ramirez, words indistinguishable and that could not be understood by the plaintiff. The plaintiff too got out of his car and said, "I am tired of these idiot drivers in Chicago." Unprovoked, the other man slapped Mr. Ramirez in the face. Like any normal man, Mr. Ramirez retaliated, slapped him back, and the two men began an all-out brawl. Punches were flying, and eventually, Mr. Ramirez was overpowered by this man, a punch to the stomach sending him lying flat on his back on the ground. Before Mr. Ramirez even knew what was happening, the man's knee was in his side, and he heard the words, "Stop, I'm a police officer." As soon as Mr. Ramirez heard these words, he immediately cooperated. He immediately dropped his hands, immediately stopped resisting, and said, "Okay, give me some identification." As Mr. Ramirez was getting up to see this identification, he felt something in his back that felt like he'd been kicked. But it wasn't a kick. It was a shot to his back, a shot that narrowly avoided missing his heart, a shot that could have almost killed him. The shot came from the other man in the car, who turned out to be a police officer. In fact, both men were police officers, undercover police officers, wearing civilian clothes, driving an unmarked car. Mr. Ramirez had no idea. Chicago Police Conduct Manual states that deadly force should only be used in very limited situations. When death or serious injury is risked to apprehend a fleeing felon. But even in these cases, the manual says that deadly force should only be used as a last resort measure, when all other possibilities have been exhausted. Officer Waldman, the defendant, could have easily yelled, "Stop! Police!" which, as Mr. Ramirez demonstrated, even the thought that there was a police officer involved made him completely cooperate. He could have fired a warning shot into the air, which would have given Mr. Ramirez knowledge that there was a gun involved. This was serious. He would have immediately stopped. Officer Waldman even could have engaged in the fight with Mr. Ramirez. 2 police officers against 1 civilian would have been an easy fight. They could have easily overpowered him. But instead of choosing to take any of these easier, safer, and more reasonable routes, Officer Waldman chose to draw his gun and shoot the plaintiff in the back. This shot caused massive trauma, caused loss of bleeding, caused massive loss of blood, a broken collarbone, and the bullet was still lodged in his side. After 2 months in the hospital, Mr. Ramirez was finally able to resume work, but he found that his range of motion, that his ability and his stamina had been completely eradicated. The pain was intense. He was hardly able to work. And now we ask that you recompense the plaintiff for this use of force. Officer Waldman should not have used this force. He should not have acted this way towards the plaintiff. He should not have fired the gun. And as a result, he caused Mr. Ramirez intense pain, intense suffering, and intense damage. The officers will attempt to show testimony that Mr. Ramirez was carrying a knife, that Mr. Ramirez was about to stab the officer with a knife. However, Mr. Ramirez has never seen this knife before. There was a knife at the scene, yes, but it did not belong to Mr. Ramirez, and even the mere presence of a knife would not have authorized such a use of force. Again, Officer Waldman could have yelled police. He could have fired a warning shot, and he could have just grabbed Mr. Ramirez. His last resort measure became his first choice. Tonight during the trial, you will hear testimony from Mr. Ramirez, who will show that he acted reasonably under the circumstances. As soon as he heard there was a police officer involved, he immediately cooperated. He never owned the knife that he's being accused of owning. The knife that was found at the scene did not belong to him. He will show that the use of force was completely unnecessary because he was not even, at the time he was shot, he was not even engaging in the fight. Further, you will hear testimony from Dr. Angris, who personally examined all the medical reports of the accident, even Mr. Ramirez himself. Her findings will corroborate Mr. Ramirez's story that he was shot in the shoulder while he was getting up from the ground, just as he describes. This testimony will be confirmed again, even by the defendant's testimony, who states that the defense expert testimony that states that he was shot while in motion and was shot downward. Ladies and gentlemen, as you decide this case tonight, remember that this is a case about a police officer who exercised his rights to use deadly force in a manner that was completely unreasonable for the circumstances. This case is not about a knife. This case is not about road rage. This case is not even about drunkenness. The only thing it's about is Mr. Waldman's actions that he took against Mr. Ramirez. His actions were wrong. His actions overstepped the bounds of what a police officer should do, causing significant injury. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we ask that you recompense Mr. Ramirez for his injury and award him damages in the amount of $200,000.